The morning sun cast long shadows across the rusty-nailed junkyard, illuminating mounds of discarded metal, broken appliances, and forgotten dreams. A gentle breeze rustled through the tall weeds that had overtaken this neglected corner of rural Oklahoma. Amidst the chaos and decay, a lone figure moved with surprising grace, a Palomino mare named Belle. Belle, once a prized show horse, had found refuge in the junkyard after her owner, a kind but aging farmer named Tom, passed away. The junkyard, now owned by Tom's gruff but well-meaning brother Jake, became her unlikely sanctuary. She roamed freely among the rusted relics, grazing on patches of clover that stubbornly persisted in the harsh landscape. On this particular morning, Belle's curiosity was piqued by an unusual sight. Nestled among a pile of old tires, wrapped in a faded pink blanket, lay a tiny baby girl, her face scrunched up in peaceful slumber. The infant's soft whimpers echoed through the stillness of the junkyard, drawing Belle closer. With a gentle nudge of her velvety nose, Belle investigated the bundle. The baby stirred, her eyes fluttering open to reveal a pair of wide, innocent blue eyes. A gurgle of delight escaped the infant's lips as her tiny hand reached out to grasp Belle's mane. Instinctively drawn to the helpless creature, Belle stood guard over the baby, her protective instincts kicking in. She whinnied softly, a sound that carried through the morning air, hoping to attract attention. But the junkyard was deserted at this early hour, and the baby's cries went unanswered. As the sun climbed higher, Belle remained steadfast, shielding the infant from the growing heat. She nudged the baby gently, keeping her warm and comforted. The hours passed slowly, and Belle's anxiety grew. She knew the baby needed more than her protection. She needed nourishment and care. Just as Belle's hope began to dwindle, a figure emerged from the shadows of the junkyard's office. Jake, his weathered face etched with concern, approached cautiously, his eyes widening in disbelief at the sight before him. "Well, I'll be," he muttered, his gruff voice softening as he took in the scene. He knelt beside the baby, his rough hands gently lifting her from her makeshift cradle. The baby, startled by the movement, began to cry, her tiny face contorted. In distress, Belle whinnied softly, as if to reassure the baby that she was safe. Jake, his eyes meeting Belle's, felt a surge of gratitude for the horse's vigilance. He knew that without Belle's protection, the baby might not have survived the morning. "You did good, girl," he murmured, stroking Belle's neck. "You did real good." With the baby safely in his arms, Jake headed toward his truck, Belle trotting alongside him. He had no idea where the baby came from or who her parents were, but one thing was certain. This unexpected arrival had changed the quiet rhythm of the rusty-nailed junkyard forever. The arrival of the baby, whom Jake named Lily, sent ripples of shock and curiosity through the small town of Harmony Ridge. News traveled fast in a place where everyone knew everyone, and soon the rusty-nailed junkyard was abuzz with visitors. Folks brought clothes, toys, and offers of help, their hearts touched by the story of the abandoned infant and the horse who had saved her. Sheriff Thompson, a portly man with a kind face and a gentle demeanor, launched an investigation into Lily's origins. He scoured missing person reports, interviewed residents, and even contacted neighboring counties, but the search yielded no clues. Lily's past remained shrouded in mystery. Meanwhile, Jake, a man of few words and even fewer emotions, found himself unexpectedly thrust into the role of caregiver. He clumsily navigated the world of diapers, formula, and lullabies, his gruff exterior slowly melting away under the warmth of Lily's innocent gaze. Belle, ever vigilant, remained Lily's constant companion. She would stand patiently by the crib, as Jake fumbled with bottles and blankets, her presence a calming influence on the fussy infant. Lily, in turn, seemed to find solace in Belle's gentle presence, her cries often subsiding at the sound of the horse's soft whinnies. As the days turned into weeks, a routine began to emerge at the rusty-nailed junkyard. Jake, with the help of Mrs. Peterson, a kindly widow from down the road, learned the ropes of childcare. He discovered the soothing power of rocking chairs, the magic of silly faces, and the joy of a baby's laughter. Lily thrived under their care, her giggles echoing through the once silent junkyard. She would spend her days exploring her unusual surroundings, crawling among the discarded treasures, her laughter mingling with the clanging of metal and the chirping of birds. One afternoon, as Jake sat on the porch swing watching Lily play in the yard, a weathered pickup truck pulled up to the gate. A woman stepped out, her face etched with worry and her eyes filled with desperate hope. She approached Jake hesitantly, her voice trembling as she spoke. I heard about the baby found in the junkyard," she said, her gaze fixed on Lily. I think she might be mine." Jake's heart sank. He had grown accustomed to Lily's presence, to the way she filled hissome changes, child-proofing the house, setting up Lily's old crib again, stocking the pantry with her favorite foods. But none of it felt like a burden. It felt like preparing for the return of someone who had never truly left his heart. The next morning, Jake woke up early, a rare excitement humming in his chest. He scrubbed the house from top to bottom, dusted off old picture frames, and carefully placed Lily's toys where they used to be. Belle stood by the fence watching him with quiet anticipation, as if she too sensed that something was about to change. When Sarah arrived for the home visit, she was greeted by the sight of Belle, nuzzling one of Lily's stuffed animals that had fallen in the grass. The sight brought a soft smile to her face. Jake showed her around, answered every question with sincerity and honesty, and by the time she left, she had already made up her mind. "You're not just ready," she said warmly. "You're exactly where Lily belongs." Just a few days later, Jake stood outside the county building with Belle waiting in the truck, his hands trembling slightly as he signed the final papers. Then the door to the office opened, and a small figure came running out. Lily, her hair tied in messy pigtails, her little boots stomping across the pavement. "Jake!" she squealed, throwing herself into his arms. He caught her and held her tight, his voice thick with emotion. "Hey, little sunshine, missed you something fierce." From that day on, the rusty nail junkyard transformed. It still held its piles of scrap metal and old engines, but it was also filled with life again, with laughter, love, and the soft patter of tiny footsteps echoing across gravel and grass. Belle resumed her role as guardian and playmate, following Lily around as she built castles out of old tires and made daisy chains in the weeds. Jake, once a solitary figure in a forgotten corner of Oklahoma, became something more. He became a father. Maggie, still recovering in the hospital, wrote Jake a heartfelt letter thanking him for stepping up when she couldn't. She didn't know what the future held for her, but she promised to do better, and Jake promised to keep her updated with pictures and stories of Lily's life. And so, the horse who saved a baby girl, the junkyard that became a sanctuary, and the man who thought he was too broken to love found themselves woven into a story that no one in Harmony Ridge would ever forget. Because sometimes, the most beautiful families are the ones you never saw coming. The woman who introduced herself as Maggie recounted a heartbreaking story of teenage pregnancy, a disapproving family, and a desperate attempt to provide a better life for her child. She explained that she had left Lily at the junkyard, hoping that someone would find her and give her the care she couldn't provide. Maggie's story was filled with regret and remorse. She spoke of sleepless nights haunted by the image of her abandoned child. She had tried to move on, to convince herself that she had made the right decision, but the guilt had gnawed at her, eventually leading her back to Harmony Ridge. Jake listened intently, his heart heavy with conflicting emotions. He saw the genuine pain in Maggie's eyes, the love for her child that shone through her tears, but he also couldn't shake the feeling that she had abandoned Lily, leaving her to the mercy of fate. Sheriff Thompson, who had been discreetly observing the conversation, stepped forward. He gently questioned Maggie, verifying her story and confirming her identity as Lily's mother. He explained the legal implications of her actions, but also acknowledged the complexities of her situation. The decision ultimately rested with Jake. He could fight for custody of Lily, arguing that Maggie had forfeited her rights as a mother, or He could give Maggie a second chance, allowing her to reclaim her child and try to rebuild their lives together. Torn between his own desires and what he believed was best for Lily, Jake retreated to the solitude of his workshop. He paced among the rusty tools and forgotten projects, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. He thought of the joy Lily had brought into his life, the way she had filled the void left by his brother's passing. But he also recognized the deep bond between mother and child, a bond that he, as a bachelor, could never fully replicate. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the junkyard, Jake made his decision. He emerged from the workshop, his face etched with a mixture of sadness and resolve. He approached Maggie, who sat nervously on the porch swing, Lily sleeping, peacefully in her arms. "Maggie," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "I believe you love Lily. I see it in your eyes, in the way you hold her." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I'm not going to stand in the way of you being a mother to your child, but I want you to know that Lily has a home here with me and Belle. If things don't work out, if you ever need help, you know where to find us." Maggie's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. She thanked Jake profusely, promising to stay in touch and keep him updated on Lily's progress. As she climbed into her truck, Lily nestled securely in her arms. Jake felt a pang of sadness, but also a sense of peace. He had done what he believed was right, even if it meant saying goodbye to the little girl who had captured his heart. Life at the Rusty Nail Junkyard returned to a semblance of normality, but the silence was deafening. Jake went through the motions of his day, sorting scrap metal, fixing old engines, but his heart wasn't in it. He missed Lily's laughter, the way she would toddle around the yard, her tiny hands reaching for his calloused ones. Even Belle's playful spirit seemed subdued, her watchful presence no longer accompanied by the sound of little feet running through the dirt. Weeks turned into months, and the seasons changed. The vibrant colors of autumn gave way to the stark beauty of winter, and the junkyard was blanketed in a pristine layer of snow. Jake received occasional updates from Maggie, postcards with pictures of Lily growing bigger and stronger, her smile radiant. The news brought him a bittersweet joy, a reminder of what he had lost, but also a reassurance that Lily was thriving. One evening, as Jake sat by the fire nursing a cup of coffee and lost in thought, a knock on the door startled him. He opened, to find Sheriff Thompson standing on the porch, his face etched with concern. "Jake," the sheriff began, his voice grave, "I have some news about Maggie. It's not good." Jake's heart sank. He had a premonition that something was wrong, a feeling that had been gnawing at him for weeks. He invited the sheriff in, his mind racing with anxious thoughts. The sheriff explained that Maggie had been involved in a car accident. She had been hospitalized with serious injuries, and her prognosis was uncertain. Lily, thankfully, was unharmed, but she was now in the care of social services. Jake felt a surge of protectiveness for Lily. He knew he couldn't let her be placed in foster care, shuffled from one unfamiliar home to another. He had to do something to ensure her safety and well-being. Without hesitation, he told the sheriff he wanted to take custody of Lily. He explained his connection to her, how he had cared for her in the first months of her life, how Belle had been her protector and companion. The sheriff, who knew Jake to be a good man despite his gruff exterior, agreed to help him navigate the legal process. The next day, Jake drove to the social services office, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and apprehension. He met with a social worker, a kind woman named Sarah, who listened patiently to his story. She explained the requirements for foster care, the background checks, the home visits, the commitment involved. Jake assured her that he was ready to do whatever it took to provide a loving and stable home for Lily. He spoke of his comfortable house on the edge of the junkyard, of Belle's gentle nature, of the community support he had received when Lily was first found. Sarah was impressed by Jake's sincerity and his obvious affection for Lily. She agreed to expedite the process, recognizing the urgency of the situation. She scheduled a home visit for the following day, and Jake left the office with a renewed sense of purpose. He returned to the junkyard, his mind buzzing with plans. He would need to make some changes to his house, child-proof it, create a room for Lily, stock up on diapers, formula, toys, and most importantly, prepare himself for the challenges and joys of fatherhood. As he drove through the gates of the rusty nail junkyard, Belle greeted him with a welcoming whinny. He stroked her soft mane, feeling a surge of gratitude for her unwavering companionship. Together, he knew they would face whatever the future held, and they would provide Lily with the love and stability she deserved. The home visit went smoothly. Sarah, the social worker, was charmed by Belle and impressed by the cozy, if somewhat unconventional, home Jake had created for Lily. She saw the genuine love in his eyes when he held the little girl, the way he instinctively knew how to soothe her when she fussed. A few days later, the official word came. Jake was granted temporary custody of Lily. He drove to the social services office, his heart filled with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Lily, now almost a year old, was a bundle of energy, her eyes sparkling with curiosity as she took in her new surroundings. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of adjustments. Jake, with Mrs. Peterson's help, navigated the challenges of potty training, temper tantrums, and bedtime stories. He learned to decipher Lily's babble, to anticipate her needs, to understand the nuances of her ever-changing moods. Belle, as always, was an invaluable companion. She patiently endured Lily's attempts to ride her like a pony, her tiny hands clinging to her mane. She would follow Lily around the junkyard, her watchful presence a source of comfort and security. Life with Lily was far from easy, but it was also filled with unexpected joys. Jake discovered a playful side he never knew he had, a capacity for love that surprised him. He found himself singing silly songs, building makeshift forts out of scrap, metal, and reading bedtime stories with exaggerated voices. Lily, in turn, blossomed under his care. She thrived in the freedom of the junkyard, her imagination ignited by the rusty treasures and the wide open spaces. She developed a deep bond with Belle, whispering secrets into her ear and sharing her snacks with her equine friend. One sunny afternoon, as Jake watched Lily chase butterflies in the meadow, a wave of sadness washed over him. He thought of Maggie, lying in a hospital bed miles away, unable to witness her daughter's happiness. He knew he had to do something to bridge the gap between mother and child. He decided to take Lily to visit Maggie. He packed a bag with Lily's favorite toys and a change of clothes, and they set off on the long drive to the hospital. Belle, of course, came along, her presence a calming influence on both Jake and Lily. The hospital room was small and sterile, the air heavy with the scent of antiseptic. Maggie, pale and frail, lay in the bed. Her eyes lit up when she saw Lily, tears streaming down her face as she reached out to her daughter. Her voice was weak but filled with love. Lily, initially hesitant, soon warmed up to her mother, her tiny hand reaching for Maggie's face. They spent the afternoon playing games, reading books, and sharing quiet moments of connection. Jake watched from the corner of the room, his heart aching for Maggie but also filled with hope. As the sun began to set, it was time to leave. Lily, exhausted from the day's excitement, fell asleep in Jake's arms. Maggie, her eyes filled with gratitude, thanked Jake for bringing Lily to see her. "She's beautiful," Maggie whispered, her voice hoarse. "You're taking good care of her, Jake. Thank you." Jake nodded, his throat tight with emotion. He promised to bring Lonely. Jake spent his days in a daze, his mind endlessly replaying the memories of Lily's laughter, her little hands trying to help him with his work, and the way she would run to him with open arms. Belle would follow him around, nuzzling him as if trying to comfort him, but the hole left in his heart was too vast for any amount of affection to fill. Weeks passed, and while Jake kept busy with the junkyard, it was clear that something was missing. The place felt like it had lost its soul. The vibrant energy that Lily had brought to it was gone, and in its place was an overwhelming emptiness. He tried to tell himself that Maggie was doing the right thing for Lily, that she was her mother and deserved to raise her, but the pang of loss was something Jake wasn't prepared for. One evening, after a particularly long day, Jake found himself sitting on the porch swing, Belle by his side. The sky was streaked with the colors of the setting sun, and for a moment, he allowed himself to imagine that everything was the way it used to be. He could almost hear Lily's voice in the distance calling to him, asking him to come play. He closed his eyes, letting the breeze carry away his sorrow, but it never lasted long. The ache would always return. It was then that he heard the faint sound of tires crunching on gravel. His heart skipped a beat. He stood up, his eyes scanning the entrance of the junkyard. Could it be Maggie? Had something happened to Lily? The truck came into view, and Jake's breath caught in his throat as he saw the familiar vehicle of Maggie's. His heart thudded painfully in his chest. He walked toward the gates, his mind racing with questions. The truck stopped, and Maggie stepped out, looking exhausted but determined. She smiled when she saw him, but there was something different in her expression, a mix of hope and uncertainty. She had Lily with her, standing on her lap, her eyes wide and curious as they both stepped out of the truck. Jake froze for a moment, the shock of seeing Lily again almost too much to bear. The emotions came crashing down on him all at once, and he had to swallow the lump in his throat before he could speak. "Maggie, what?" he started, but Maggie cut him off. "I know this is unexpected," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I know it's been hard on both of us. But Jake, I need your help. I can't do this alone." Jake looked at Lily, who was now standing in front of him, holding out her arms, as if to ask for him to pick her up. Her face lit up when she saw him, and for the first time in weeks, Jake felt a spark of hope. His heart, though heavy, filled with warmth at the sight of her. Maggie continued, "Lily has asked about you every day. I've told her about the junkyard, about Belle, about the games you two used to play. She misses you so much, Jake. And I'm not sure I can give her everything she needs, but I want her to be happy." Tears welled up in Jake's eyes. He looked down at Lily, who was now tugging on his sleeve, waiting for him to pick her up. He didn't hesitate. He reached down and scooped her up into his arms, feeling the familiar warmth of her tiny body against his chest. He kissed her cheek, his heart overflowing with emotion. "I've missed you too, sweetheart," he whispered. "I've missed you so much." Maggie watched them, her face softening as she wiped away a tear. "I'm not asking for you to take her from me again, Jake. I need you to be a part of her life. We need you. She needs you." Jake looked at Maggie, his heart torn. He knew that Lily belonged with her mother, but he also knew that he had a role to play in her life. He had helped raise her, loved her, and watched her grow, and that bond couldn't be erased. "I'll always be here for her, Maggie," Jake said quietly, his voice firm but gentle. "I can't be her daddy by blood, but I'm her dad in every other way that matters, and I'll never stop being there for her." Maggie nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Thank you, Jake. I want what's best for her, and I know you do too." The two of them stood there, a silent understanding passing between them. For the first time in a long while, Jake felt a sense of peace settle over him. He wasn't alone in this anymore. They could figure it out together, for Lily's sake. And as he stood there, holding Lily in his arms, he knew that whatever the future held, they would be okay. They were a family, bound by love, loyalty, and the magic of the rusty nail junkyard. Jake sat on his porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, casting vibrant hues across the sky. The quiet of the rusty nail junkyard had become his solace, but there was still an ache that lingered in his heart, a space that had once been filled by Lily's laughter and boundless energy. Her presence was missed, even though she was never far from his thoughts. Despite the emptiness, Jake had found a renewed sense of peace over the years. He had embraced his role in Lily's life, even though it wasn't exactly what he had originally envisioned. He wasn't her primary caregiver anymore. Maggie had worked hard to rebuild her life and was a loving and devoted mother, but he was still her dad, her constant source of comfort and support. His heart swelled with pride whenever he thought about the time they spent together. Weekends at the rusty nail junkyard were a whirlwind of activity. Lily's face always lit up when she arrived, and she was filled with boundless energy, running to Belle, who greeted her as if she were her own child. The trio would spend hours exploring the yard, building forts and riding bikes, creating memories that would last a lifetime. Jake cherished these moments, knowing that Lily's love for the junkyard, for him and for Belle, was still as strong as ever. During the week, he would often drive to Maggie's apartment in town. Those visits were just as meaningful to him. He had watched Maggie transform into the mother Lily deserved, and it filled him with hope to see their bond growing stronger. Every day, he would help around the house, play with Lily, and always left feeling grateful that, even though she wasn't living with him, he still had a place in her life. Yet, as time passed, there was still a part of him that longed for the days when Lily was a constant presence at the junkyard. He missed the bedtime stories, the cuddles in the morning, and the little spontaneous moments of affection that had once filled his days. The emptiness wasn't something he could completely shake, but it had softened with time. One evening, as Jake sat reflecting on the quiet of the junkyard, he realized how much his perspective had shifted. Family, he thought, wasn't defined solely by blood. It was about the connections you made, the love you shared, and the experiences that brought people together. In Lily and Maggie, he had found a family that gave him more joy than he ever could have anticipated. Jake no longer needed to be the primary caregiver to know that he had played an irreplaceable role in Lily's life. He would always be there for her, her daddy Jake, the man who had loved her when she needed it most, who had shared her joy, wiped away her tears, and taught her the value of unconditional love. As the years passed, Lily blossomed into an independent, young girl. She excelled in school, made friends effortlessly, and continued to visit Jake at the Rusty Nail Junkyard, where she would rediscover the magic that had once captivated her as a toddler. The junkyard, which had once been an abandoned space, was now a haven for her imagination, and a sanctuary where she could reconnect with the man who had shown her what it meant to love. Watching Lily grow into a remarkable young woman filled Jake with a profound sense of gratitude. He had been given a second chance at fatherhood, and it had enriched his life in ways he never could have imagined. In the process, he had learned that family wasn't just about being there from the beginning. It was about the lasting love, loyalty, and memories that shaped the bond between them. The rusty old junkyard, Belle, and the little girl who had once been abandoned in its midst had all transformed Jake's life. And in that transformation, he had come to understand the true meaning of family and the enduring power of love.